and welcome to today's information session on NRF postgraduate funding opportunities for the 2024 academic year. This presentation will be given using slides provided by colleagues at the NRF, with additional amendments included by the Centre of Excellence for Mathematical and Statistical Sciences. In order to apply for NRF postgraduate support for the 2024 academic year, it is important that you check the NRF's framework documents to ensure that you are in fact eligible to apply for the particular program in question. Otherwise, your application will merely be excluded and will have been a waste of significant amount of time on your part in terms of putting the application together. The general eligibility criteria for NRF postgraduate bursaries for 2024 are as follows. Support is provided for full-time studies, for those students who have an average mark or grade point average, seen here on this slide, abbreviated to GPA, which is higher than or equal to 65% for the previous degree. For example, if you are applying for PhD support in 2024, you must have received a mark of 65% or higher for your master's degree. There are also age restrictions that apply. These are maximum ages at which you can apply for these particular awards. These are implemented because the funding for this program comes from the South African taxpayer through Treasury to the National Department of Science and Innovation and then on to the NRF. It is important for us to keep in mind that resources within South Africa are in fact limited, and as such, the NRF and the DSI have taken the position to add in an age restriction limit on applications. This is to ensure that candidates who are supported through this program are then able to remain active within the South African economy for a potentially longer period of time than if they were to get these degrees at a very late stage in their lives. There are two potential funding options available, and these are known as full cost of study, or FCS, which are available to South African citizens and permanent residents, and an additional category known as partial cost of study, or PCS, which is available to South African citizens, South African permanent residents, and also to international students. It is important to note here up front that if you are a non-South African applicant, you will only be eligible for partial cost of study awards. In order to determine whether you fall into a full cost of study or partial cost of study category, we will then look at the following 3 slides at the various levels. This will help you to ascertain which level of funding you are eligible for. In terms of honours awards, exceptional achievers with a grade point average higher than or equal to 75% for their majors in their final year of undergrad will be eligible for full cost of study, as will applicants with disabilities with a mark of upwards and equal to 65% GPA, and also applicants who are within the financially needy category as assessed by ISFAP. Partial cost of study awards are available to other students who are financially stable and within the average mark range of 65 to 74% in the final year of study. It is important to note the age caps here, that applicants applying for honours funding must be 28 years of age or younger in the year of application. And only South African citizens and permanent residents are eligible to apply for honours awards. International applicants with citizenship held elsewhere are not eligible to apply for honours awards. At the master's level, the categories are again outlined in a similar way to the previous slide. You can identify here which category you fall into, and it is important to note that applicants that are applying for master's funding must be 30 years of age or younger in your year of application. Similarly, for doctoral funding for 2020, which category one might fall into from this slide. It is important to note that applicants for doctoral funding must be 32 years of age or younger in their year of application. The framework document is referred to again here on this slide, and the link to this will be shared as well and available from the NRF webpage. It is important to note that there are opportunities to apply for master's and doctoral extension funding. We know that research is an iterative process and that it might take longer to complete your master's or PhD than was initially expected. Traditionally, the NRF gives master's awards for 2 years and PhD awards for 3 years. So these extension awards are available for a period of 6 or 12 months beyond that initial period. Applicants for 2024 extension grants must be continuing with their degrees in 2023 in order to be extended into 2024. These awards only apply to full-time master's and doctoral studies. And the value of the award will be the same as the value of the 2023 funding. Applicants do need to have support from their supervisor and or the program funding them, e.g. the SACHI Chair or the Centre of Excellence, in order for the extension application to be considered. On this slide, we see a summary of citizenship eligibility for the various categories of awards from honours, masters, and doctoral, and including awards that involve upgrading a master's to a PhD, and also extension support awards. Again here, we remind international students who are not South African citizens or permanent residents that you are not eligible to apply for honours awards for 2024. In terms of other exclusion criteria for postgraduate funding, we draw potential applicants to this slide. Here we can see, for example, that students may not apply for a degree at the same level as another degree that they already have. So if you already have a master's degree, for example, you are not eligible to apply to the NRF for your second master's degree. But we again remind potential applicants to please refer back to the NRF framework document, and that the NRF reserves the right to change these criteria at any point in time, and the NRF documentation with regard to this process is the final word in this matter. As part of the NRF postgraduate bursary application process, there is a financial means test that is conducted on all students to see whether they fall into the FCS or the PCS category based on financial need. Financially needy students are defined as those students who have a household income of less than 350,000 Rand per annum. In order for a financial means test to be completed, you need to download and complete and re-upload the signed consent form that is available as part of the application process. Students that were previously supported in previous degrees by the NSFAS scheme or the ISFAP scheme will not be retested. However, you must attach proof of your previous NSFAS or ISFAP testing to your application. The values for the FCS and PCS awards are being displayed on screen now. These are split according to honours, masters and doctoral levels. The value of the scholarship in rands is shown in the grey blocks provided. And there are also 2 additional amounts that may be allocated, in some instances, to students. These are linked to electronic study devices and assistive technology devices that may be applied to the application and the award. The duration of support for each of the various categories is being shown on screen now. Once you submit your application, it is then sent to your home institution where you are planning to register in 2024, and it will be assessed for completeness by the NRF's representative based at your institution. This person is known as the NRF Designated Authority, or NRF DA. Once your institution's DA has checked your application, they will then forward it on to the NRF. Once this has happened, financial means testing, as well as academic rigor, will be assessed. As part of the academic assessment process, there is provided a review scorecard for you to refer to see what your application will be judged on. It is important that you ensure that all necessary categories of your application are filled in completely, so that you don't lose scores in your assessment for having left a particular section out. The rubric for the Honours Review Scorecard is shown now. The Masters Funding Review Scorecard. This has additional categories included in the Honours rubric. This includes a project overview of your research concept and your proposed aims of your research. It is important when filling out your application that you have ideas with your proposed supervisor for your 2024 master's research. It is critical that they are also able to support your application to the NRF in order for you to be successful. So please, if you are thinking about putting in an application for NRF Master Support for 2024, kindly consult with your Master's proposed supervisor now. Thank you. The Doctoral Funding Review Scorecard includes additional categories such as the originality or novelty of the doctoral study, as well as the potential societal and social impact of the research that is proposed. Again, we strongly recommend that you approach your potential PhD supervisor for 2024 now at the application writing stage, so that they can provide you with additional support and insights into some of these additional sections. The Extension Support Review Scorecard is available as well. Kindly refer to this if completing an extension application. That brings us to the end of the first part of the presentation. The second part of our presentation will be. So these slides again have been provided by colleagues at the NRF and have included some amendments that we as the CoE-MaSS have included for the purposes of this presentation. The postgraduate call documentation is available on the NRF website, as mentioned previously, and the link is shown on the screen now. It will also box at the end of this session. In order to start your application, you will need to go to the NRF Connect system. And there are 2 individual profiles that you will need in order to log into the system successfully. The first is an ORCID profile, which is an individual researcher profile. This is valid for your lifetime, so it can move with you even throughout your research career as you move from one institution to another. The second profile that you will need is an NRF profile. And this profile, we will show you how to add if you don't already have one in the slides that follow. So first of all, you will need to log in to NRF. If you don't have one, there will be an opportunity to register for one as part of the process, as shown on screen now. Once you have registered with your ORCID profile, you will then be able to log into NRF Connect. And then from this point, you will need to ensure that you have an NRF profile that is linked to that. Either you may have an existing one, or at this stage, you would then need to register for one if you don't have one at this point in time. The system will guide you through how to create these new accounts as per the screenshots provided to you. Before you then commence with starting your postgrad bursary application, you need to then fill in the My CV section of your profile. This is really important because these categories pull through into your postgrad application. So if you haven't filled this out, there is a chance that the information may not successfully port across to your postgraduate bursary application. These sections include your career history, so these might be your previous degrees, previous certifications, and possibly also research publication outputs that you have already produced. Obviously, for honours students, this is an unlikely category where you would have publications, but for example, a PhD student may already have publications from their master's degree. You then have to go into the system and then indicate which of the particular funding opportunities you will be applying for. Now, bearing in mind that the system does automatically know from your date of birth or your age fields in your My CV section how old you are, you may not see all of these opportunities when you log in. And that is because the system excludes you from seeing some of the opportunities if it can pick up that you are not eligible for. So if, for example, you are 40 years old and you log into the system and try to apply for an honours or a master's or a PhD degree, you will not see those as the system can already detect that you are older than the age eligibility limits available. If you have any problems at this stage, you should then contact your NRF DA at your 2024 proposed institution for assistance. The NRF DA is always the first port of call for anything relating to your particular bursary application. Please always just remember to send your reference number, your student number, or your application number as a reference to help the NRF DA be able to assist you as quickly as possible. So once you've selected your particular category, honours, masters, extension, etc., you will then be able to, it will then pre-populate your questions accordingly, remembering that some sections will have different questions depending on if you're at an honours level or a PhD level, for example. You will see your application reference number, and this is the number that starts, for example, with PMDS in this example, and that should always be included in any communications you have with your NRF DA or the NRF going forward. You will note that within the application, there are some sections that are compulsory and some sections that are not compulsory. The compulsory ones denoted by the little red stars. As you complete a section, The updated category will change to show that something is complete, and you will get the little green tick. And you will only be able to submit your application once the entire application is green ticked. So that is important. If you're trying to submit and you have incomplete red crosses, you won't be able to submit the application to your NRFDA at your 2024 institution. There is a section that relates to the financial need status, as was mentioned earlier. If you have gone the ISFAP financial means test previously, you can then upload that document here. Or alternatively, if you haven't gone through that process before, you can then use the consent form to then submit that to undergo a financial needs test. If, for example, you opt out of a financial needs test, it is likely that you will then only be eligible for PCS funding. So please just keep that in mind. By opting out of the financial means testing, that may negatively impact the outcome of your application. So you will be asked a question, have you ever received funding before? And if the answer is yes, you'll be asked to upload the proof. This should be an official university stamped financial statement where needed if you're asked to upload your proof of funding. And then you can also upload your previous outcome letter from either NSFAS or ISFAP if you have already received a status from them previously. So again, financial need, just to remind us, this looks at your combined gross family income. And this is your consent form at this stage. Okay. In terms of being financially needy, as defined by the NRF, that would be a gross family income of less than or equal to 350,000 Rand per annum. If your gross family income is more than 350,000 Rand per annum, you will then move into the partial cost of study category, so the PCS category. In terms of the application categories, so you'll be asked to provide some additional information about the type of scholarship that you will be applying for, and there are selected drop-downs that you can use to choose the correct option. For those of you that will be applying for a CoE grant from a Center of Excellence, the type of scholarship would be a grant holder linked scholarship, and you would then need to indicate which Center of Excellence in particular you are applying to, also via selecting the appropriate drop-down for this. If we then look at this particular example, you would need to indicate that you are a full-time registered student, because this doesn't apply to partial part-time funded students. You would indicate that your scholarship is linked to NRF funded research. And in the case of a Center of Excellence, under funding opportunity, you would select from the drop-down list which center you're applying to. And under the NRF funded researchers application or grant reference number, you would need to include what is called the UID, the unique identifier, for the particular center or SARCHI chair that you're applying to. In most of the Center of Excellence's cases, they have this information available on their website. However, if it is not available, you would need to contact that Center of Excellence or the SARCHI chair in question, and you would need to ask them for their NRF UID number so that you can put it in at this point of the application. This then ensures that when you submit your application, it is sent to the correct center or SARCHI chair for review. If you don't fill in any information here, your application will go into the NRF general pool. So then it might be assessed by non-subject experts or people who are sitting on the periphery of your particular area. So again, if you're looking for CoE or SARCHI funding, you need to fill in these two categories that are highlighted in red with the relevant information from your Center of Excellence or your SARCHI chair. So as mentioned, the different applications have different questions. And we're now just going to have a brief look at the applications in the different categories and levels so that you can see what kind of expectations there are for your particular application. So to start off with the honours application, you will be asked for information about your proposed institution. Please keep in mind, this is the institution where you will be studying in 2024, not the institution that you're sitting at now. For example, if you're sitting at Wits University now, but you're applying to the University of Limpopo for your PhD next year, then the institution you fill in here is where you will be doing your degree next year. You fill in the information about the discipline to be funded, the school where you will be next year, the proposed start date of your degree, and then also information about whether, if you are currently working, are you willing to resign your current position in order to take up the scholarship? Because the assumption here is because you are full-time registered, you are not working part-time on the side. And then there's also a request for your average marks obtained. And it's important to realize that your marks now might not be your final marks. You may still have final exams coming up towards the end of the year. If you are successful on a provisional basis and you receive a provisional award from the NRF, they will then request your final results. If your final results come back and they are less than 65%, the provisional award will then be revoked by the NRF and taken away. So the final marks still have to be within those designated criteria that were mentioned in the previous slides. With regard to master's and doctoral applications, so it asks you for some basic information about the take up your research, and it asks specifically for your research project title. Research project titles are of critical importance because this also shows that you have been in consultation with your proposed supervisors for next year, and you know the area that you are expecting to work in and the type of project you will be working on. Applications where there is no research project title or where there is a generic answer like not applicable will be rejected by the NRF and will not go through for by the NRF DA and will not be sent through to the NRF for assessment. There's also a section for the title and the abstract of the research. Then it asks about information relating to the degree to be funded, which you can see on screen. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail, but it does ask questions, for example, like, does any financial report that you've received from your previous studies bind you into a service contract, like you then have to work for that company for a certain amount of time? Because again, here, you are expected to not be working whilst doing this particular NRF funded degree. Then with regard to academic achievements, you're asked for information about your previous degree and also your average percentage mark for your majors. So if you are applying for a PhD, they would be looking at your marks in your master's. And for example, if you're applying for a master's, they will be looking at the marks for your subjects in your honors degree. For master's applicants who are still busy with an honors in the current year, at this point in time, you would list your third year undergraduate marks. And then at the end of the year, you would submit your final honors marks and they would check your GPA to make sure that you are in fact still above the 65% cutoff. Again, as mentioned, if you are below that cutoff, once you get your final results, the provisional award will then be revoked at that point in time. In terms of details of the master's research, they ask for information about your project outline, your alignment to national imperatives, and you'll get information on that from the system when you log in, and the potential impact or the societal or knowledge creation that results from your research. Now, you might not be able to identify this upfront, And this is again where we refer you to please speak to your proposed supervisor for 24 now and get them to assist you with the potential impact of your research section. In this day and age, the NRF are very particular about looking at what is the societal impact of research. And that is aligned with some of their previous documentation, which you can find if you refer to it online, with regard to their science engagement framework and strategies. So please do have a look at those and make sure that you are in fact filling this out to completion. Okay. In terms of details for the doctoral research application, the same two previous sections are highlighted. And then we have sections regarding the problem statement and the aims and objectives. So appropriate literature references must also be included in this section. And please just pay attention that there might be some word limits. So please just keep that in mind. We've already shown you the assessment rubrics for how these sections will be assessed previously in this presentation. So please, for any level, honors, masters, or doctoral, please make sure when you fill out your application, you refer to the assessment criteria and check that you are in fact providing all the information that you're going to be assessed on. There's nothing worse than realizing after the fact that you forgot to fill in a section and that was worth 30% of your points for the marks you were getting. Also, reminder, the NRF bursaries are becoming highly competitive because band values are quite high relative to what they should be. It does mean that the NRF year on year is funding fewer applicants that they were historically when people were getting lower amounts. So that means that the amount of bursaries available annually is less than they were previously. So this is a competitive process, and you absolutely as an applicant need to be putting your best foot forward to make sure that your application is looking better than others that are being submitted. So again, please, if we can't, please consult with your academic supervisor for 2024 for assistance in getting these applications written in the best possible way so that you can be successful. In terms of application support input, this is a critical part of your application. In terms of your application, once you have submitted it, you will then need to have your application supported on the system by your proposed supervisor for 2024. So it's really important that when you fill in your supervisor's details on the NRF system, you make sure that the email address that's provided at this point in time is the correct one that your supervisor uses and checks regularly. Because if you submit your application and your supervisor doesn't approve it, it will not then go on for further assessment. Again, this is why we stress to you that it's important to be in contact with your supervisor early before you submit your application, so that they will also be aware that there will be an application coming to them that they will need to go into the system and support. Because without that support, the application will not proceed for funding. In terms of master's applicants, you will either be able to select your master's supervisor, or if a supervisor hasn't been allocated for your research, you may also be able to select an option of a head of department. Again, if you don't have a supervisor for next year, it's important to alert that head of department that there will be an application coming from you. And keeping in mind that heads of department might be inundated with 50 different applications that they need to go through the day before the deadline, it is really in your best interest to ensure that your application is submitted well before the deadline. And once you've submitted, send a follow-up email to your HOD or your supervisor to alert them that you've now submitted, and to follow up with them they have in fact approved your application. So in terms of that, if the required referee that you select does not respond, by the deadline that the NRF set for referees to respond, your application will not be submitted for further consideration. Okay, if you have a situation where you look for a supervisor on the system and there's a section that says user not found, and you search for somebody in the system and their name doesn't appear, you can then select user not found and you can populate their information from scratch. But check if the details are already in the system, because then that will hopefully have the person's most up-to-date contact information. In terms of attachments, there's then an opportunity for you to attach additional documentation that supports your application at this point in time. And just please be aware that there is sometimes a size limit on files that can be attached. So please read the NRF instructions in the system about what caps exist or what size limits exist, so that your documents are not excluded. In terms of master's and doctoral students that are applying for the 6 or the 12-month extension support, your applications, you would indicate at this point in time what time frame you are looking for support for. And the supervisor must respond and recommend the extension. So again, same as the other first-time applications, if you're applying for extension and your supervisor does not respond via the NRF Connect system and approve your application in the NRF Connect system, your application will then not be submitted for further assessment and consideration. Again, please be in touch with your supervisor about this so they can assist and support your applications. In terms of that information, the details of the extension will be pulled already from the NRF system, and then you would just need to provide any outstanding information. In terms of extension grants, you are asked for some additional information as to why the study could not be completed in the initial period, the initial 2 years for master's or 3 years for PhD. And you also need to provide a comprehensive work plan as to how you're planning to complete the degree within the 6 or 12-month additional time period that you're applying for. In terms of the application closing dates, please note that the closing dates listed on this page at the moment are the NRF closing dates. And every institution is allowed to set their own internal closing date for student submissions before this NRF final date. So if you're not sure when your institution's closing date is, please contact either your REIS or your postgraduate funding office or your student fees office, depending on how your university is structured and what offices they have that provide the support, and find out from them in advance when the internal closing date will be, because you as a student will only submit up until that internal university closing date. NRF closing dates are when the NRF DA needs to have made sure that all the final submissions have been submitted to the NRF. So in terms of the process, you're aware that the call is currently open. You then need to check your application closing date in terms of your proposed 2024 institution's closing date, not your current university where you may be registered at if it's different. This is the 2024 institution's internal closing date. Once your application is submitted, it goes through screening and review at the institutional level by the NRF DA. Those that are eligible and have all their documentation in place are submitted to the NRF for financial means testing and academic review. And then once that has happened, the funding decisions are communicated in November, December for master's or doctoral, and in January to March next year for the honors students. And this is because the honors students' results usually come out significantly later in the year. Once those funding decisions are communicated, the outcomes are announced. So you will be able to find these outcomes listed on the NRF website. So if you want to go back and check if your results are out, you can then check this via looking for the outcomes list, which will be on the NRF website in due course. So just as a final word to reiterate, at your 2024 institution, if you have a problem or a query, your NRF DA at your 2024 institution is your first port of call for queries about your application. The DAs are usually located in your research office, your postgraduate office, or a student fees or student support office at your 2024 host institution. If you're not sure who that person is, you can contact your institution or ask your 2024 supervisor or head of department who this at your institution would be if you're unsure. The NRF DAs check for eligibility, completeness, and correctness of your application, and they are the internal reviewers who click the final submit to send your application through to the NRF. They make sure that everything is there that is required and is uploaded, and these are the people who can also reopen your application for editing if you've clicked submit accidentally and then realize there's a problem. However, this can only be done before the NRF's closing deadline. And please, if you are contacting your NRF DA for assistance, please make sure to include your application reference number in all communications with your NRF DA so that they know exactly who you are and your information about you so that they can assist you in the quickest way possible. In addition, within the NRF funding framework, you will also see the following contact details available. If there are additional queries that can't be answered by your NRF DA, that the NRF themselves need to respond to. So if it's for a first-time Center of Excellence, Honours, Masters, or Doctoral application, the contact person is Ms. Magotla Finger. And if it's for Masters and Doctoral extension support, then the point of contact is Ms. Nontokozo Kunene. Please always make sure if you are liaising with the NRF directly that you always CC your correspondence to supportdesk@nrf.ac.za so that you then get an NRF ticket reference number for your query in terms of follow-up. And that brings us to the end of the NRF presentation about 2024 postgraduate bursaries.